It's my pleasure to introduce Holly Grell Lawe. Holly has been a project manager here at Georgia Tech in a variety of different roles for 20 plus years. I think she's one of the few people around here. 29 years. I knew she'd been here a little bit longer than I had. Currently, Holly works in our Energy and Sustainability Services group, and she's here today to talk to us a little bit about ISO 50000, where it's at and where it's going. So with that, I'll turn it over to Holly.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You had a good session this morning?
Yes.
Good, good. I wanted to talk to you today about something new, something I think is innovative, particularly, you may too if you have spent any time at all with ISO management system standards. I'm going to talk to you about a standard called ISO 50001 and tell you how it's been piloted here in the U.S., some of the positive results, and give you a little bit of a feel for something different that's coming down the pike with regard to a new management system standard. And let's see. Well, we try that. All right. Before I start, though, I do want to talk about what energy management is in the context of my discussion today. And the reason being was a couple months ago, I was down at Warner Robins talking about this, and when I got all done, I realized that there were some really hardcore engineers who really didn't have a clue what I was talking about, because energy management systems to them are all automated systems, technology, device-based, etc. So I do want to say that for the purposes of today's discussion, energy management is a framework, and it's a framework for integrating energy into the existing business processes of the organization and using those business processes to achieve continual improvement. Technology may be a part of that, especially new energy technologies, but we're really talking about a business process approach here. And we talk about energy performance. We define that as measurable results that are related to use, consumption, or efficiency. And our context for energy management today takes account of the fact that much of energy efficiency in existing facilities really can be improved, can be changed, enhanced by looking at how energy is managed as opposed to just the adoption of additional or new technologies. So, what's our problem statement? Well, if you look across the 4 end-use sectors for energy, which are residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation, every year in the U.S. we spend $1.2 trillion on energy. And a good 32% of that is industrial expenditures, and probably a good part of the transportation costs as well are actually also being borne by industrial firms. We have, when you look really close at it, a really scary electrical grid across this country. You've got a lot of private companies, private ownerships, a lot of aging infrastructure. And although we have made progress, according to the statistics, in terms of weaning ourselves from foreign oil, we haven't done that yet. So we're still in a situation where we have some considerable risks. Well, what's needed here? Well, what the international community decided, along with the U.S., who was very much in a leadership role here, decided that what we really needed was a comprehensive approach to energy management. And that was really clear because there were energy management standards emerging all over the world. As a matter of fact, here in the U.S., Georgia Tech wrote the very first standard for an energy management system back in 2000. But by the time we got around to a big international move, there were probably a good dozen national standards that had emerged. So ISO 50001 is what is considered to be and what is emerging to be through actual application a best practice business tool. And it has been demonstrated with a great deal of support and effort on the part of the U.S. Department of Energy as an effective approach in industry. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. So what do we have as a lot of the current approach in a lot of organizations to energy management? Well, we have, the roller coaster where we go, okay, our cost of energy is really high. We need an energy audit. We need somebody to come in and do an energy audit for us. And they come in and they make some good recommendations. You've got some great opportunities for improved efficiencies, for reducing energy intensity. And so you'll get some activity. So, maybe a lighting project or a turn off the lights program to avoid wasting energy. Excuse me. And we do a project, we get it under control, might even get a nice return. But the problem is that these types of things are usually dependent on either an individual or a small group of people who are really committed to energy efficiency and to their position as an energy manager. And there's no uptake across the organization. Management likes the cost savings, but management it's not their job, they don't think, to make sure that those savings are sustained over time. And a lot of times the energy managers are in a position where they may not have the authority or the influence or the connections across the organization, for example with procurement or with design, to make the changes that sustain those savings over time. So at some point those savings get lost, you start all over again, you're back up the curve. Gee, our energy costs are high, we need an energy audit. And what you have is this continuous cycle of riding on the roller coaster here. So the new approach is really a systems-focused, systematic approach to energy management. When you manage energy systematically, you will have a process for ongoing generation of continual improvement in energy performance. Because you're paying attention to not just what do you need to do to get the savings, but to sustain it over time. And you put in the controls and the training and the other things that really facilitate the culture change and the change in behavior to maintain these savings, then you're able to sustain those for a much longer period of time. You have a process for evaluating new technologies, for looking at what your energy situation is for your organization, and better utilizing advanced monitoring systems. Because with this systematic approach, you always know what your consumption is. You always know what your uses are. You always know what your significant energy uses are. You always know what your best opportunities for energy performance improvement are. Okay? These are not one-shot activities. These are things that you do as a matter of course. One thing that's very exciting is that this is a standard that uses data, requires you to use data to make energy management decisions. And I think most of us would probably agree that good data leads to good decisions, or at least better data leads to better decisions. It allows you to probably more appropriately deploy energy efficient technologies and to continually move toward integrating as part of your culture and the behavior of your workforce energy practices into what they do in their job every single day. So this structured approach looks a little bit different, and hopefully what it's doing is reducing your costs, reducing your consumption. You have a senior management commitment to the program. You implement the program and get some initial savings sustained using the processes that are embedded in the energy management system. Okay? And at first, these might be real simple things. Just simple things to reduce consumption, like, oh, gee, powering down equipment when it's not in use. Those types of things. Over time, it becomes part of the culture of your organization, and that's where you want to end up. That's where you're going to attain your greatest improvement, your greatest savings. This is a bit busy, and I apologize for that. One of the thing that makes ISO 50001, which was published in June of last year, different is that it actually has requirements for measured energy performance improvement. How many of you are familiar with ISO 14001, the environmental? Okay. Is the word data in that standard? Or data analysis? No. Doesn't have the word performance in the requirements. Doesn't touch it with a long stick. Okay? This standard is not an energy version of 14001. As a matter of fact, there's blood on the floor at the very first international committee meeting on the part of the U.S. to make sure that the Europeans did not get an energy version of 14001, which is what they wanted because they had their development going on for a regional standard that did really exactly that. This is a standard that is applicable, as ISO management system standards are, to any type of organization in any situation. It focuses on both improving the management system and improving energy performance. Unlike, for example, ISO 14001 for environmental, it's not just this process of, oh, well, if you continually improve your management system, that will lead you down the path of improved performance. Now, I don't necessarily argue with that, but I've also been an auditor for close to 20 years, and I've seen, well, we've improved our management system. We went from print documentation to electronic. It's like, okay, how does that exactly improve the environment? Well, I don't know, but you did improve your management system. This standard basically says you've got to do both. You've got to audit both, you've got to demonstrate both if you do third-party certification. Okay? And it really relies up front, very heavy, on a data-driven approach. Okay? It uses collection and analysis of available data. Any organization can start with the data they have. It doesn't require you to go out and do a year worth of collection and analysis of data. But you have to use this data to support your decisions. It also improves your ability to benchmark, to measure and report your progress, to actually quantify your savings, your reductions in consumption, your reduction in intensity, however you want to normalize that data. It promotes transparency and communication to management. And it also helps improve operations on the floor, as well as some of your capital cost decisions. Because you're going to have analysis ready to go as to what your prioritized best shot opportunities are for improving performance. The standard requires that you do that and have that available at all times. The U.S. actually led this effort. ANSI and the U.S. Department of Energy chaired the technical committee, the U.S. did, and we fought very hard to make sure that there was a data-driven approach preserved in this standard, and that it was one that actually said that you must demonstrate improved energy performance. So what are the benefits? Well, it's just the energy focus from individual projects, as I talked about with the roller coaster, to a systematic data-driven approach. It requires top management to be engaged on an ongoing basis. So unlike 14, which barely talks about top management, this standard, like ISO 9001 for quality, has a pretty long list of what management is responsible for, including incorporating energy into long-term or strategic planning. It increases the reliability of outcomes by emphasizing a process rather than those individual energy manager cheerleader folk, or those just really motivated, dedicated folk, and builds a system using a variety of processes. The other element here is that it involves people. You know, a lot of times when we're looking at making improvements in energy efficiency or considering new or different types of equipment, our focus really is on at the facility level and the equipment level. And many times looking at energy opportunities at the system, process, or people level is not what really gets the attention. And within this standard, the scope of what you need to manage are all 5 of these things: facilities, equipment, systems, processes, and personnel. So it's also a people-involving standard as well. A lot of you have probably seen the Deming, Schuhart, whoever you want to give credit to, plan, do, check, act model. And ISO 50001, like other ISO standards, has this model as its underlying framework. The idea here is very simply, you plan what it is you're going to do. And in this standard, you make that plan based on first going out and getting data about yourself and analyzing that data so that you know all of your energy sources. You know all of the ways in which you use energy, and you know what your energy consumption is. You use that information to make plans to move forward. This includes setting a baseline and having actual energy performance indicators. It includes setting specific measurable objectives and targets for improvement in energy performance. The do part, that's when we go out and we implement the actions that we've planned in order to achieve the improvement and sustain it over time. Closing the loop, we come back around and check on the result. Okay, are the results that we're getting what we thought we would get? And finally, relevant, useful, targeted information goes up to top management. They do a review and take the appropriate action. So in this regard, the standard is very similar to the other ones. And these are basically just a breakout of the processes that are associated with each of these major pieces of the model. So you've got top management taking responsibility. You have an energy policy which will have a commitment to achieving continual improvement in energy performance. A policy that commits to supporting energy efficient design and procurement. So it's not limited to the usual, just comply with legal and other, commit to continual improvement. Has much more teeth. The energy review process, I'll highlight in just a few minutes, but that's the know thyself part of the standard, which is going out and getting the information and data that you need to understand where you are and where you can go. And then we implement using the same types of processes that all businesses usually already have in place. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. Making sure that the appropriate training, documented information, communication, etc. is available, and that people understand what their responsibilities are, and your processes are adjusted to take account of energy as an input. Come back around to our checking processes, lots of monitoring and measuring in this standard. And then we come back around to our management review and action, as I like to call it. So it doesn't sound like such a passive, gee, if I hold a 4-hour meeting once a year, I've done something called management review. You can see that this standard is very much exactly modeled around the Plan, Do, Check, Act model here. Does have a specific breakout, pretty lengthy part of it is about management responsibility. And we do have a new concept here that hasn't been in other ISO standards for management systems, and that's the concept of a boundary. So you define not just the scope of your system, you know, what activities, operations, processes, facilities, whatever does it apply to, but what are the actual boundaries of that scope? And boundaries tend to be physical things, okay, geography. And this standard will require that you take a look at and define both for your system, so it's very specific. There is, as I mentioned, a long list of requirements for management responsibility. This standard doesn't let them off the hook in terms of participation and involvement. It's not a standard to say, oh, I bless the policy, go forth and do, and let me know how it goes. They do have to incorporate it, as I said, into their long-term and strategic planning. They have to actually be part of the communication to the workforce about the importance of energy. They have to make sure that they are involved with, or that they are aware of what energy performance indicators are being used, making sure that they're appropriate to the business, making sure that appropriate objectives and targets are set that can be adequately resourced. And this, it's not on this slide, but one thing I also really like about this standard is that it uses a team Now, to make the Europeans happy, the standard says a team could be one person, okay? But we generally hope that a team is not one person and that you actually, this is your mechanism, not just for implementing the system, but for running it in the long term is an established and continuing to exist and be active energy team. So the team concept, very much something the U.S. And the Asians wanted in there. Got an energy policy, just like the other management systems. You got to get your commitments out there. Again, these are not those commitments that go, you know, in some frame in the lobby in a gilded frame. Those are called mission statements, and nobody pays attention to them. This is a policy. You have to actually do what you say. When you put in the policy, you better do it to demonstrate it. And again, it makes it looking for commitments that not just that you will achieve in continual improvement in energy performance, but that you will make sure that the needed information and resources is available and accessible for the system. So it goes to be a much more specific, including a policy that supports energy efficient design and purchasing. And I'll talk about design a little bit because we're not talking product design there. This is really, to my mind, a lot of the meat of this standard. It has some very significant planning requirements. The idea here is that you are going out developing what I call a profile of your energy situation. What kinds of energy do you use? How do you use it? How much of it do you use? What are your significant uses, either based on a great opportunity or a significant consumption? In other words, you know, what are your potential, you know, butt-biter issues? Where are your risks with regard to your energy use and your energy consumption? What are the variables that affect those significant energy uses? Is it heating degree days? Is it levels of production? Is it, you know, square footage of the building? So that you actually have performance indicators that tell you something meaningful about the organization and how it uses energy. Part of this is estimating, well, how are we going to use energy and how much you think we're going to use in the future. Now, the future might be, for some organizations, next quarter. For some organizations, it might be next year or 5 years from now. Oftentimes, that depends on how they may integrate this with existing sustainability programs. Your performance indicators will need to tell you something about those significant energy uses and something about your overall performance. And in order to know whether you're making progress, you got to have a place to start from, right? And that's the baseline. So you can see here, I think, for any of you who have some experience with management systems, that it's got some pretty significant planning requirements. And that first part is that know thyself. Know what your situation is. Just the fact that you track your utility bills and graph the consumption and cost is not enough. And it's hard, you know, in some countries, that may be all they have. I think for most cases, it's really hard to say that that's all you have here for a U.S. company. You will always know, as I mentioned, part of this understanding your situation is having a process for identifying, analyzing, and prioritizing your best opportunities for improvement. Those aren't things that just happen when an energy audit is conducted, or, you know, a once-in-a-while type of event. That information is available and accessible and used in the system. And then, of course, what improvements are you going to make? Okay. And what action plans are you going to put together to get there? And action plans have a little more teeth here, too. You not just have to say who's going to do what, and what are you going to do, and when are you going to do it by, but you have to say, how are you going to actually verify that you made a change in performance, in performance, that there was a change? And how do you verify that the action plan was executed as it was supposed to be? So there's two very key pieces of verification that need to be spelled out in the action plan for this standard. In implementing and operating the system, we use our existing business processes to make this happen. And what are we implementing? We are implementing management of our significant energy uses. We are implementing the monitoring and measuring that we need to know how things are going and what's happening and not happening. This is where we also incorporate our system as part of how we manage change in our organization. If you don't connect your energy management system to your change management processes, you're not going to be gaining full value from the system, and your system will fail at some point. Because it wants you, when you are developing or designing new or modified activities, systems, processes, or equipment, to take the appropriate energy considerations into account. Because those are great opportunities for making a difference in your organization. So you may have a process where in change management, maybe environmental has some kind of checklist. Okay, what you want to do is okay, it's not going to change our permit, we don't have to do a new permit. Part of that process now will also need to make sure that energy is a factor in designing and modifying those systems, equipment, processes, and facilities. The standard recognizes that you've got both the demand and the supply side of energy here. And there are requirements related to procurement that are going to be focused on those items that you determine can significantly impact your energy performance, using a bit of life cycle analysis so that you truly understand what the cost is to you. And it also has a requirement related to specifications for the purchase of energy. Now, in many markets around the world, they don't have any choices. So the U.S. fought very hard to keep this requirement in this standard. Okay. You may not have a choice with regard to electricity, but maybe in your market you have a choice with regard to natural gas. You certainly have choices with regard to fuel sources. Okay. So it really is taking a very broad view of where you're fitting in and incorporating energy into your business processes. I mentioned there's lots of monitoring, measurement, and analysis in this standard. There's a whole laundry list of things that you're required to monitor and measure. And some of those are pretty straightforward, like your energy performance indicators and items related to your significant energy uses. Making sure that your objective targets and plans are effective. Actually having monitoring and measurement requirements related to those action plans. Knowing from time to time whether or not your actual consumption is anywhere near what your expected consumption is. And then we also have our processes of internal audits, which will now not just address the energy management system, but also are required to address and determine whether or not energy performance improvement has occurred in the system. That's an explicit requirement of the internal audit process. And finally, we have the management review and action process, which basically says, give us good data and information on what's happening and what results we're achieving, what's working, what's not working. And having management make the appropriate decisions, because they ultimately have responsibility for continual improvement and making sure that appropriate resources are allocated. So some of the drivers, uptake of 50,001 is going to be driven by a number of different factors. I think primarily what we're seeing is being driven by organizations that really want to have an internationally recognized response to their corporate sustainability or organizational sustainability programs, energy cost or consumption reduction initiatives. Like other ISO standards, I think you're going to see this push down the supply chain. We've been working very closely with the U.S. Department of Energy for 4 years on a number of things related to this standard and some programs that they have. And we see big companies coming and wanting to push energy management down the supply chain. And I think you're going to start seeing that very soon, if not already. We all know that at some point cap and trade programs, carbon or energy taxes may be a way of life for us. There's increasing market value of, I guess I should have put true green products, services, etc., or a reduced carbon footprint. and also perhaps not necessarily in this country, but in a lot of other countries, international climate agreements will also help drive uptake of this particular standard. I want to take just a very few minutes and talk about the Superior Energy Performance Initiative, because this is how ISO 50001 has been piloted and undergone demonstration programs here in the U.S. I think we started back in 2008 or 9, doing programs for the Department of Energy that were basically called demonstration programs that piloted the implementation of ISO 50001. Now, the Superior Energy Performance Program also has very specific levels of performance improvement that must be achieved. Superior Energy Performance is close to being ANSI and ANAB, American National Accreditation Board, certification program. And the program for industry, it will be done for other sectors, is the part that's fully been deployed. And at this point, we've got 10 facilities that have been certified. I got an email this morning, Cooper Tire in Arkansas is undergoing their 50001 and Superior Energy Performance audits today. We've got 31 additional industrial facilities as well as 12 commercial ones in the pipeline implementing the standard and using a very robust measurement and verification protocol so that their claimed level of energy performance is actually verified according to a very robust protocol that's been developed. And at this point, according to the bean counter, statistical type folk, both at Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley Lab, the payback periods that we're seeing from these demonstration programs are running about 4 to 6 months, okay, including recovery of staff time costs. Right? Superior Energy Performance requires conformance and certification to ISO 50001. It requires a specified level of performance improvement in order to be certified as silver, gold, or platinum. Has some similarities to the general framework of LEED in that regard. And it has been supported by the U.S. Council for Energy Efficient Manufacturing, which really has served kind of as the oversight board for this whole program and really has involved a great deal of time and effort, and a lot of really good folks from great organizations have really invested time over the last 3 to 4 years to make this, a program, a certification program worth having for energy. These are, just wanted to show you some of the organizations that have participated in these demonstration programs. The first Texas pilot, the Mid-Atlantic demo, Midwest demo, Southeast have closed. I actually ran the Mid-Atlantic one. We still have demonstration projects going on in California, as well as up in New England, and a second round in Texas. But these are the organizations that made the commitment to implement that standard and work toward verifiable energy performance improvements. Now this is kind of messy, but it's some really good data that is relatively new. Obviously DOE is not going to invest in a lot of demonstration programs without wanting pretty robust evaluation and assessment of the results. Let me just say here that this was just from 5 facilities that they've done in-depth data collection on and interviews, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're seeing here is, again, SEP certification requires 50001 be fully conformant with the standard. And in this case, what we have is the green bar indicates basically the net energy performance improvement. The orange bar here are the improvements in energy performance that are attributable to the SEP program, including the implementation of 50001. So the purple bars here basically show what was the energy performance improvement they had before they enrolled in the SEP program. And this is basically data over a 3-year period. And so in this case, 17% of the 25.8% improvement with regard to cost savings were generated by the implementation of 50,001 and the other SEP requirements. Here we've got about 12% of a 21% improvement was attributable to SEP and 50,001. This organization was interesting. They had negative. They were really going the wrong direction when they joined this program, which I think is one reason why they joined the program. And interestingly, they were able to turn things around to actually end up at the end of the 3-year period with a positive savings here. This is a very small organization here. This organization was also very interesting because they didn't do any capital projects to achieve this savings here. And they attributed 4% of their 5.2% increase was attributable to 50,001 in SEP. And they made that improvement solely on changes related to operational controls and workforce behavior. No capital projects at all in that improvement. So what we're seeing is good results, especially as these processes for energy management become more systematic. They're not just the burden of the energy manager, and responsibilities are kind of spread out. So I will make these slides available in PDF format. Not sure how they get distributed, but I will make them available. I have some additional information here on the strategy behind superior energy performance and some specific information on the different levels of performance. There's 2 pathways, one for mature organizations that have been at this for 30 years and ones that would rather just go on straight energy performance. There's a best practice scorecard associated with it that you might have some interest in. And there are also programs being developed for professionals to work with organizations with regard to SEP and 50,001. We've got some benefits that are available. And Georgia Tech has been very much involved in this. I've been on the U.S. TAG. A number of us have from the beginning. We've been to the international meetings. Our next one is in Japan. The last one was in Dublin. We offer training, lead auditor training. We've got e-courses. We offer implementation programs. Basically, if you have an interest, we probably have something that might be a good fit for your needs. I've got some websites here that I'll make sure are included in the PDF of these slides and available to you, which I think you will find interesting. I'm happy to take any quick questions, and I encourage you to send me an email if you'd like any additional information or some gory details I could share. Any questions very quickly? I know I'm running into lunch. I hate standing between folk and their lunch. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today.